between 30 days of fasting. This hadith is very clear. It's clear for a sky normal condition and a cloudy sky for exceptional conditions. But the condition for the UK horizon is almost the opposite. Cloudy skies are the norm and clear skies are the exception. And I always say this, by default, Great Britain has become a secular country, but the horizon of Britain is even more secular than the society itself. Cloudy skies are the norm and clear skies are the exception. And many verses in the Quran provide us with the jurisprudential and the legal framework to use for ascertaining calculations. And these verses also inform us that Almighty Allah has actually set the journeys of the moon and the sun. Therefore, using these concepts, which Hazrat Allama Sahab was very explaining in very detail, is not forbidden, but we are following the injunctions actually set out in the Holy Quran. That's why the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah have adopted a principle to start the commencement of each Islamic month. And the same, with some variations, but the dates remain the same, has been adopted by Wifaqul Ulama. So nobody could say that this is a Brelvi concept which they accuse us of. This is also Wifaqul Ulama saying this. So what is the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah principle which the great ulama adopted in 2005? And I will read this. Do forgive me, my Urdu is not that strong, and if I get stuck, Allama Sahab will assist. रोयत हिलाल के बारे में बरतानिया के उलमाए अहले सुन्नत का मुत्तफिका फैसला. This was adopted on Sunday 13th of November 2005. In clause 1 of this statement, ऑब्जर्वेटरी की इतला की रोशनी में जिस दिन मराकश के मतला पर रोयत का इम्कान हो उसके मुताबिक इस्लामी महीनों का आगाज किया जाएगा. क्लोज 2, अगर मराकश में इम्कान रोयत के बावजूद रोयत हिलाल का ऐलान न हो तो फिर किसी भी मुल्क से शरई शहादत और खबर हासिल करके मराकश के मतला पर इम्कान रोयत के मुताबिक इस्लामी महीनों का आगाज किया जाएगा. क्लोज 3, रोयत हिलाल के बारे में कबल अज वक्त हतमी और कतई ऐलान नहीं किया जाएगा. This is the principle which the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah are following. Summary in English is this, that we look at the horizon of Morocco and ask the question that throughout Morocco, is the crescent moon visible based on astronomical calculations? If it is yes, we then still look at trying to get some actual sighting information. And the actual sighting news that we can easily and which is readily available to us is from South Africa. Because the system there is they actually sight the moon. We use that to verify our astronomical calculations, And once those two conditions are fulfilled, the next month is the start of the Islamic month. So we applied this principle for the month of Zulhijjah, which to conclude with, when I do conclude, I will actually give all the data for Zulhijjah as well. So you go from this meeting with very clear conceptual clarity that there is no doubt that we have started Zulhijjah based on the actual principles of Sharia, which Hazrat Sahab has outlined, and also the scientific principles. No doubt whatsoever, because this isn't just purely a system of starting January, February or March. Our worship is dependent on these Islamic months. We must appreciate, and this is our downfall, that those matters embraced in the Holy Quran and informed to us by our beloved Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam have just been confirmed by science some 14 or 1500 years later on. The Quran is full of evidences of this kind. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الشمس والقمر بحسبان والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم يسألونك عن الأهلة قل هي مواقيت للناس والحج. When these verses were being recited to that illiterate nation, they were not aware what Wal-Qamru Husban was. But the Prophet ﷺ was fully aware. 1400 years ago, the science, through its developments, has actually confirmed that what the Quran and the Prophet of Islam said 1400 years ago was the truth, but nothing but the truth.
Nara Takbir, Nara Takbir, Nara Risala, Islam, Azmat Mustafa.
This is the beauty of the Quran and the sayings of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We need to come closer to the teachings of our beloved Prophet, not adopt a system which goes away from the actual root cause and the root of the commandment. And yes, there are some brothers who would say, brother, but we could do ijtihad. Listen, the ulama here, they will correct me if I'm wrong. When you have got two options, and one of the solutions is more close to the commandment, the actual commandment, why are you deviating from that? When the astronomical data can actually tell you when the moon is actually visible, why do you leave that and go to the birth of the moon? Why? Nobody could. I am waiting for that answer. Even if you do ijtihad, let's agree with you for argument's sake. But do ijtihad to bring us close to the commandment, not deviate 90 degrees from the original commandment. And if you have the readily information available, for the next 50 years, the astronomical data will tell you when the moon is visible. I was reading in a newspaper the other day, those who follow Saudi Arabia, they were emphasizing that we must follow the astronomical data. We must follow the astronomical data. And somebody asked me that, look, they are following the astronomical data, you are following the astronomical data. What's the difference? The difference is this, brother. They find out from the astronomical data when was the moon born. Our question to the astronomical data is, fine, it's born, tell us when is the moon visible. सवाल ये पैदा होता है कि ऑब्जर्वेटरी की फल्की हिसाबात से अखज़ क्या करते हैं? क्या आप ये अखज़ करते हैं कि चांद की पैदाइश कब हुई है, या आप ये अखज़ करते हैं कि चांद काबिल रोयत कब है? जब आपको ये मालूमात ऑब्जर्वेटरी दे सकती है कि चांद काबिल रोयत कब होगा, किस दिन होगा, और जिस मुकाम पर होगा उसकी उफ़क़ की बुलंदी क्या होगी, उसका इर्तिफ़ा क्या होगा, चांद की कितना हिस्सा रोशन होगा, अल्लाह के बंदो इसको छोड़कर फ़कत पैदाइश पे इन्हिसार करना और इसको फिर नाम इज्तिहाद का देना, ये जुल्म है, ये जुल्म है, और मिल्लत इस्लामिया के अंदर इंतशार फैलाना है. My honorable audience, what can I say? We have tried to provide an overview on the way forward. I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards all of us, especially Hazrat Qibla Allama Fazl Ahmad Qadri Sahab, for organizing this meeting, for all of the speakers and for the attendees and my elderly who have actually been very patient and listened to us. If we have made many mistakes, we seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah allow us to enhance our knowledge and commence the Islamic months on one date. When I say one date, let me also clarify one confusion. Some people very innocently say, why can't all of us in all of the world do Ramadan al-Mubarak on one day? It's a very, very innocent question, and it means well. However, we must remember that according to the most recent surveys, there is now more or less 196 official countries in the world. Tell me, brother, who is going to validate and verify the sighting news from 196 countries? I tried to do 2, and I'm telling you, it's a very difficult job. 196 countries. Who is going to verify and validate the news from 196 countries? Virtually impossible. Is this? Whole of the world cannot start Ramadan in one day. The reason being is the world is divided in 2, the West and the East, which Allama Sahib gave references. It is night time in the West, and in the East it is daytime. So those who say start on the same day, they must remember that even when they utter this word, same day, at that time, their same day is another day in another country. The date has changed and the day has changed. So there is no concept of being on the same day. 2 dates and days are prevailing across the world. It is now nearly 7:45 in the UK, but in many countries of the world, the time is 5 hours forward, 18 hours forward, or behind. So there is no concept that let's start it on the same day. I don't say this out of any emotions. Let me give you a practical example. For example, if the moon is sighted in Hawaii at 6 p.m. sunset, they make the announcement that the crescent moon has been sighted for Ramadan, for argument's sake. Those who say that one sighting in the world is sufficient for everybody in the entire world, tell me, how can you follow this? That they've announced it at 6 p.m. and at the same time in Tokyo, which is 19 hours ahead, it is 1 p.m. in the day. Their solar time has passed, their new day has started. How can you act upon that? Impossible. After hearing all this, I think you will agree that the crux of the matter is this: वो मुअज़्ज़ज़ थे ज़माने में मुसलमान होकर हम ख्वार हुए तारिक कुरान होकर. The data for Zulhijjah, and Allama Sahib instructed me, and I followed all of his instructions. He said, don't rush like you did on Noor TV. The problem in Noor TV yesterday was I was given 7 minutes, so I had to do 120 miles per hour. Makkah Muazzama Zulhijjah dates, let me give you those, and I want you to walk away with this clarity. The moon was born in Makkah Muazzama on the 5th of October, 4:35 morning. The sunset on that day was 1907, the moon set was 1922. The age of the moon was 14 hours, and the lag time, Farq-e Ghurubain, was 15 minutes. The altitude of the moon was only 2 degrees, whereas the condition is that the altitude has to be 5 degrees as a minimum for the moon to even start shaping into the form of the crescent. Hilal ki सूरत बनती है 5 डिग्री पे जा नजर आना तो बात की बात है. Okay, 2 degrees. So it is the danger limit. It is well below the horizon. You cannot see the moon on 2 degrees. Very, very simple. For example, if somebody is lying down, and I want to explain this and everybody understands, and they have a blanket on their face. If they just take their blanket off a little, you will only see a small fraction of their forehead or their hair. But for the full face to be emerged, the whole blanket needs to come down to their neck level. Correct? Very common sense. Just think of it like that. If the danger limit, the horizon, the moon is only 2 degrees above, what are you going to see? You are not going to see the hilal. You may see something else, UFO or something else, but definitely not the crescent. On that day, the elongation on the 5th is only 7 degrees. Elongation is the angular separation of the moon and the sun. The greater the elongation, the more chances of the moon to be visible. Allama Sahib has very extensively explained this from the authentic texts. So therefore, brothers, the moon cannot be sighted in Makkah Muazzama on the 5th of October. However, the announcement of Saudi Arabia is that the 1st of Zulhijjah is the 6th of October. And read every single Urdu newspaper in this country, the moon has been sighted in Saudi Arabia. No sighting whatsoever. On the 6th of October, today, the moon's altitude is 12 degrees. In Makkah Muazzama, elongation is 20 degrees. And the moon can be sighted by the naked eye. The visibility is today, it wasn't yesterday. So the 1st of Zulhijjah is the 7th of October. In Madinatul Munawwara, the altitude of the moon is also 2 degrees. In Riyadh, the altitude of the moon is 2 degrees, cannot be seen on the 5th. On Taif, the moon's altitude was 3 degrees, cannot be seen. In Tabuk, the altitude is 2 degrees. And I don't make any challenge, brother, because to make a challenge, it is the job of our elders to challenge anybody. But by the prayers of these ulama kiram, I do make one humble statement. Go anywhere to their moon sighting conferences and just try and listen. And if they give you examples by country and country, come back and tell me and say you were wrong, they did give us examples. They will never give you examples like this. In Tabuk, the altitude was only 2 degrees. On the 5th of October, moon cannot be sighted. In Dammam, now Dammam is an interesting place because in Saudi Arabia, 2 elderly gentlemen appear from nowhere and they say that we sighted the moon. And one of them 4 years ago was 85 years old and the other one was 87. I'm not sure whether they're still alive. If they are, may Allah give them a long and healthy life. But if you add 5 years on, and they used to say we've seen the moon in Dammam. So I have brought the data for Dammam here. In Dammam on the 5th of October, the moon's altitude is only 2 degrees, cannot be sighted. Now we move to Morocco. In Morocco, there's a place called Dakhla, where the latitude of the moon is only 23 degrees, Tulul Ars. If the latitude is lower, there's more chances for the moon to be sighted. If it is of a higher nature, like it is in the UK, 50 plus degrees, it cannot be sighted with ease. If the moon was to be sighted on the 5th of October, it should have been sighted in Dakhla, as Allama Sahib said. But how can the moon be sighted in Dakhla when the altitude of the moon is only 4 degrees? And the elongation is 9 degrees and the moon cannot be sighted. And you know, the illumination, the crescent illumination, how much of the moon is illuminated, that is only 0.7%, not even 1%. How can you see the moon? Then in Dakhla on the 6th, today, the moon can be seen by naked eye. Because the altitude of the moon has reached to 14 degrees and the elongation has reached to 22 degrees. Therefore, the moon sighted is on the 6th, not the 5th. Therefore, the 1st of Zulhijjah is the 7th of October. Darul Bayda, which we call Casablanca. In Darul Bayda, on the 5th, 3 degrees is the altitude and elongation is only 9 degrees, cannot be sighted. When can it be sighted in Darul Bayda? Today, on the 6th. In South Africa, yesterday in Cape Town, the moon was just about 7 degrees, where the bare minimum is 5 degrees, for the crescent to start forming its shape. And the elongation was on the borderline of 8 degrees, therefore the moon was not sighted. Actual verifications provided from South Africa. The moon was not sighted in South Africa yesterday. When was it seen? It was seen today. But even if it wasn't seen today, the 30 days of Zulqa'dah were complete, so we cannot go ahead. So the 1st of Zulhijjah will be on the 7th. In Saudi Arabia, if there is one place where the moon could have been sighted if it was to be sighted, that was Najran. The reason being the latitude of Najran is 17.37 degrees. Very low indeed. But in Najran, the altitude of the moon was 3 degrees and the elongation was 7 degrees, could not be sighted in Najran as well. If you recall in Shawwal, there was a moon sighting explosion which took place in the Jung newspaper. And by that I mean that an announcement came out that the moon was seen in Portugal, which was absolutely nonsensical. It was just another attempt to bring people to the feet of the Saudi Arabia announcement. And even then we said that this is absolutely fabricated, and people from Wifaqul Ulama and other scholars have actually gone to Portugal to verify those announcements and those news which came from Portugal, and it clearly emerges that they were at mistake. But if there is any other such news from Portugal, I have also seen what Portugal looks like on the 5th of October. The moon's position in Portugal is that it was only 11 minutes after sunset on the horizon. And the altitude was only 2 degrees, whereas the elongation was 9 degrees. The moon cannot be sighted in Portugal. When I say the moon cannot be sighted in Portugal, it's not just me and these very learned scholars here. Brother, if any astronomical expert in the worldwide, across the world, says this, that the moon can be sighted with an altitude of 2 degrees, we will revert and we would say to you that, look, we've made a mistake. Anybody prove to us that the moon could be sighted on 2 degrees, it's virtually impossible. Virtually impossible. Who is left? London. Here in London, the problem is this, that the latitude of this country is of a higher degree, more than 50 degrees. 51.30 for the case of London. The moon set before sunset in London yesterday, and the altitude of the moon was -1 below the horizon. How could you can't even see it, it's set before the sun. On the 6th today, even today seeing the moon, correct me if somebody who's got supervision in Derby has seen it, please tell us, even the moon cannot be sighted here today because the altitude is 4 degrees. Very, very extreme difficulty, and it is a cloudy sky out there, it's not that clear. What we see as clear, as I said, due to the atmospheric conditions, the sky is not really clear, and we cannot see the moon. That is the case of all of those cities, towns, and countries which I have outlined. Brothers, if there is anything I have said where you feel that I have left anything untouched, or it gives some room for more clarifications, feel free to please write down your questions and send them through. But if somebody wants to very politely and humbly stand up and ask the questions, we are not those who are going to say, sit down, you can't ask a question. You can, and we will be more than happy to entertain your questions as much as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the tawfiq and the will to do so. May Allah bless us and allow us to create unity, and the step taken by Allama Sahib needs to be appreciated, and inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him the rewards for this good step in the right direction. Wa ma alayna illa al-balagh.
To Raja Zahid Nawaz Sahib for giving us a very informative insight into the situation of the sighting of the moon in the various Muslim countries, including Saudi Arabia, Morocco, etc. Now, if anyone does have any questions, please, if I can have them at the front, we will relay them to the scholars. Before we do, I just want to mention one or two things which I think are quite important. We had requested Maulana Suleiman Ghani and Maulana Mufti Yusuf Danka Sahib to come and address this congregation. However, I have some bad news for you. Maulana Suleiman Ghani had a new moon of his own. His wife gave birth today. This is the bad news. His wife gave birth today to a baby child. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the Mawlud, make him a humble servant of the deen, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless both parents. I was reading some WhatsApp messages from some of the brothers, and something comes to mind. Always have husnul zan about a Muslim brother. There was a perception that maybe we advertised the name incorrectly, maybe we didn't really invite these scholars, we just wanted to present a one-sided, biased interpretation of moon sighting. But can I request any neutral Arshad, can you come here please? And it just shows how important it is to verify facts before you spread them to people. No, you. Arshad, who is this message to?
Sulaiman Ghani.
What does it say?
Islam Sheikhuna.
Sheikhuna, which means our Sheikh.
Please let us know when you have access to a landline. Jazaks Islam.
The reason why I sent the message to Suleiman Ghani is even though he was unable to make it to us physically, I requested that if he is able to get to a landline, we would love to hear his point of view, even though not physically present, but at least over the phone. So the good news is that Maulana Suleiman Ghani will be in touch with us as soon as he gets to a landline. As soon as he does, he will text me, and then inshallah we will have him here. So before we doubt the intentions of Muslim brothers, let us think twice. Because those that haven't heard this, they have read the message, which indicates that somehow this was some malicious plan just to invite the Braillevi scholars, not to invite anyone else and present a biased point of view. People must do tawbah as a result of this now, and they must tell their brothers that what we said was actually incorrect. It's just adab of how we address one another. You see, we have to have sincerity for the sake of the deen of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Everything we do must be done with a sincere intention, without any ulterior motives. With regards to husnul zan, you know how many times we've mentioned this before. Even if you see something which can be interpreted in two ways, and you see that within a Muslim brother, always try to interpret it in the positive way. Why? Because this is the haqq of a Muslim brother upon us, and this is our responsibility towards our Muslim brother. Whilst we wait for Maulana Suleiman Ghani, I think it would be pertinent just to go through some of the issues that have been dealt with. First and foremost, Allama Zafar Mahmud Farashwi Sahib talked about how one determines the beginning and the ending of the Islamic month. And he mentioned, according to the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the beginning of a month is determined by the sighting of the moon, and the ending of the month and the beginning of the next month is also determined by the sighting of the moon. He then mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used two forms of words in order to convey this hukam to us. The Prophet of Allah used an imperative form and order. He said, Sumu, begin the month once you have sighted the moon. And he also used a negative form whereby he said, La tasumu hatta, do not fast until you have sighted the moon. So in one instance, Rasulullah said, sight the moon and then begin the month of Ramadan. In another instance, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, do not fast until you have sighted the moon. The reason why you find these two usages in the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is to emphasize the importance of this hukam, to emphasize how important it is to begin and end an Islamic month with the sighting of the moon. Then Maulana Farashwi Sahib went on to talk about the use of astronomical data in helping to determine the ending of the month and the beginning of a month. In front of me I have an article by Allama Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani, Who is not aware of Mufti Taqi Usmani? Okay, so you're not aware of Maulana Mufti Taqi Usmani. Maulana Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani is a foremost authority amongst the Deobandi school of thought. He is the son of Maulana Mufti Muhammad Shafi, who has written a very good commentary of the Holy Quran, and we're not biased. When we see something good, we acknowledge that. He has written a very, very good commentary of the Holy Quran known as Ma'ariful Quran. His son, Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani, is one of the foremost authorities amongst the Deobandi school of thought. When there is a dispute amongst the Deobandi community, the first person, generally speaking, they refer to is Maulana Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani. As part of my own personal research on this subject, I have begun looking at what Maulana Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani has said on this before I look at others. And I mentioned that my research on this is incomplete at the moment, but I will share with you what I have found regarding Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani and his understanding of this issue. Before we go into this, Allama Zafar Mahmud Farashvi Sahib mentioned the permissibility of using astronomical data in terms of helping us determine the beginning and the ending of the month. The first scholar that he cited was Ibn Rushd, who is one of the greatest Maliki scholars, and in Bidayatul Mujtahid, Ibn Rushd comments on the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, fast by sighting the moon. If there is cloud over you, faqdurula, then determine it. The scholars have differed as to what faqdurula means. Faqdurula, some scholars say, is ijmal, is ambiguity. And this ambiguity is explained by another hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, whereby the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, if there is cloud over you, if the atmosphere is such that you're unable to sight the moon, then complete the 30 days of the month of Ramadan. This is one understanding of the scholars. Ibn Rushd mentions another understanding of the scholars, and he attributes this understanding to a great Tabi'i scholar by the name of Mutarraf. Mutarraf, he quotes as saying that when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said faqdurula, he meant use the astronomical data that you have in order to determine the beginning of the month. He then presented another scholar by the name of Ibn Daqiqul Eid. Ibn Daqiqul Eid is once again a scholar who can be classed as a mujtahid. Ibn Daqiqul Eid made a very significant point, which Maulana Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani also makes. Ibn Daqiqul Eid tried to reconcile the difference of opinion amongst the scholars. Some scholars say you are not to rely in terms of determining the beginning of the month. This is important. In terms of determining the beginning of the month, a vast majority, and this is the Jumhur opinion, vast majority of scholars say you are not allowed to rely solely on astronomical data. The other group of scholars say that it is permissible for you to rely on astronomical data. These include Mutarraf, Ibn Surayj, Ibn Qutayba, and other scholars who are also of a great caliber in terms of understanding. Now, what Ibn Daqiqul Eid does, he reconciles the two different opinions. Ibn Daqiqul Eid says that the way astronomers began the month was different to the way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam instructed us to begin the month. The Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, begin the month by what? By sighting the moon. The astronomers used to begin the month not by sighting the moon, but by irtifa'u shamas anil qamar. They used to begin the month as soon as the moon was distant from the rays of the sun. They used to determine that the new month had begun. So the Prophet of Allah said, begin the month by what? By sighting the moon. The astronomers used to begin the month how? By indicating that as soon as the moon is distant from the rays of the sun, you do what? You begin the month. There is a dichotomy between these two opinions. Now what Ibn Daqiqul Eid says, and based on the opinion of the astronomers, for example, today may be the 29th of a month.
we go out to search for the moon, we cannot sight the moon, we would begin the next month, the day after tomorrow, because we would complete 30 days. However, according to the astronomers, what they would do is, even though you may not be able to see the moon at Maghrib time, however, because they had calculated the manazil of the moon, and for them, if the distance from the moon, from the sun, occurred at 2 o'clock in the morning, they would begin the next month. Sharia would not begin the next month. They base this on the principle of the birth of the moon. They base, basically for them, birth of the moon is as soon as the moon is distant from the rays of the sun. So Ibn Daqiq says there's no real difference amongst the ummah. He says that when the scholars permit the usage of astronomy in determining the beginning or the ending of the month, but what they mean by that is قَدْ طَلَعَ الْهِلَالَ عَلَى وَجْهٍ يُرَى